Hi, and welcome back to the Art of Phrasing. This is the cello edition. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when one thinks of a string instrument is usually long, soaring melodies. And as I talked about before, the big challenge is usually bow control. And here we'll talk about the big romantic melody. How to sing, how to control the sound through a really long phrase. This would apply to all the big romantic melodies, or expressive, or lyrical, important, soaring melodies. Much like the love themes from pretty much any film score, or a Tchaikovsky symphony, or Romeo and Juliet overture, or Nimrod from Elgar's Enigma variations. In this video, we will look at the cello melody of Brahms' Second Symphony, the second movement. A seemingly never-ending, yearning melody that reaches and recedes just like storytelling. How do we phrase this? Brahms' own directions of hairpins and dynamics give us helpful hints. But again, like in our previous videos, the biggest indicator is the music itself, how the lines rise and falls, the two small rests in bars 4 and 5 like gulps of air, the printed slurs, where they begin, where they end. These are all huge indicators of phrasing. The music begins on an upbeat but sounds and looks like a downbeat. We have this 2-bar idea that doesn't really settle until bar 3 or 4, if at all, depending on how you look at it. And a major reason for this is harmonic instability. So it would be good to take advantage of these wandering harmonies to create different tone colors. So while there are many phrases within this excerpt, it really is one extremely, wonderfully long phrase until bar 12 when the violins take over. You want to make sure that you phrase through all these notes, through the detached portato notes, through the rests, through the dotted rhythms. A basic rule of thumb, like in the violin video, would be to add intensity when the line rises and to relax, but only slightly when it falls. I'd also lean in to the beginnings of the slurs while keeping the sound sustained through the lines. Sustaining is the key word here. How can we sustain the sound when we obviously have a limit to the length of our bows? Also, one thing I haven't mentioned in the other videos is that is absolutely crucial for sound production and tone color is vibrato. So I'll leave it to James to explain these things technically.
Hi, this is James from Bossa Celli. Today I'm going to share with you some tips on art of phrasing. Now, do take note that this is not an excerpt class, so I'm using this example to show you how to phrase a melody. Now, what is phrasing? Phrasing is essentially feeling the tension and release between notes, or tension and release between small groups of notes, and different people feel it differently. That's why we have so many different recordings of this symphony. Now, let us explore the first two bars of this melody. I'm going to play you two versions of it. Second version. It doesn't matter which version you prefer or which version you like. Let's talk about how we can improve your playing through bringing out that phrase. Now, I have a very special tip for you. I always visualize this phrase through subdivisions, and I think it's very, very important that you do this in your practice so that you have a very clear idea of what you want to achieve. So let's take the first two bars, and I'm going to subdivide it into 16 notes or semiquavers, and I want you to really feel the tension and the release of how these notes interact. So let's take the first example where I play it in one bar phrases instead of a long two bar phrase. I go towards the D sharp. That's what I did. But if you listen carefully, within each note, for example the F sharp and the E, the tension of the note changes in that subdivision. Listen again. Okay, so this tension change, we have to bring it out in a normal bow, like a full bow. How do we do that? We achieve it by changing the bow speed, the bow pressure, the vibrato, and the placement of your bow, whether is it near the fingerboard or the bridge. So usually when I build up a phrase, I tend to increase my bow speed a little bit more, and in that sense my vibrato also increase the intensity a little bit more so that we have a sense of direction. Just listen to the first two notes. It gives a sense of direction towards something. Listen again. And this back end of the note, I am going away from that phrase. So you can explore this yourself, whether you want to do it in a one bar phrase or a two bar phrase, it is totally up to your taste. Similarly, let's look at bar 8 to 12, where this long line requires you to really think ahead and visualize how you want to phrase this tune. Less bow here, more bow, and already going closer to the bridge. Release. And you increase the tension over here through vibrato and some bow pressure. Now, let us explore how vibrato can help you in the art of phrasing. Vibrato has two roles in phrasing. The first is to help you sing through a phrase. The second is to give attention to certain notes and to highlight it to your listeners. Vibrato is measured by how fast or slow, or how wide and narrow it is. And you have to choose the appropriate amount of vibrato you give to a certain phrase for it to work well. Let's look at the excerpt in bar 3. this part, I use a very normal, slightly quicker vibrato to help me sing through the phrase. However, if it is too quick, it will give the listener a bit too much energy, which you want to avoid. Now, coming to my second point, vibrato is used to give attention to certain notes. Let us look at bar 5. Here, the main point of this, the highlight of this bar is the E. That's the arrival point. And then we resolve to the D sharp. Notice that the E, I use a wider vibrato, and the D sharp, I use a narrower one. I hope these are good tips for you to explore the use of vibrato to help your phrasing.